Happy September 5th to you all. Thank you for joining us. We are really excited to have Hallie Crawford as our presenter today, talking to us all about navigating the first 90 days of a new job. Obviously, there's a lot to think about when you are starting a new job, and there are probably some best practices that we could all follow, and we are here to learn about what those are, things we should do and things we shouldn't do. But a few housekeeping items today. I just wanted to make sure that everyone can hear me. Important stuff. So if you could raise your hand for me when you see that little raise hand button there. Great. I'm seeing hands go up. People can hear me. Fantastic. Just a little information about today. My name is Hallie DeWald, and I am the Associate Director of Alumni Career Services at UGA. We provide free career counseling and coaching services to all alum at UGA. And if this is your first time attending one of our webinars, please note that we have these about twice a month, and we also offer virtual programs like getting your resume critiqued virtually by one of our career coaches. If you're interested in learning more about all the events that we have to offer for our alum, please visit our website at career.uga.edu and click on the Alumni tab. There's also really great resources for you. Additionally, I want everyone to know that this webinar is being recorded. So if you missed some content today and you'd like to go back and take a look at it, you'll be given a recording later on today that you can view at any time. So just know that. We also have a handout for you attached today in your handout file, so you can go ahead and take a look at that handout, maybe even print it out if you have time. Go ahead and take care of that. We also wanted you to know that if you have questions today for Hallie, please feel free to type those into the questions box, and we will get to those definitely by the end of the webinar. But should you have other questions that pop up, please go ahead and type those in. I'm really excited to introduce Hallie to you all today. If you've been with us and she's done a webinar in the past, you already know that she's a dynamic speaker and a wonderful career coach, with a lot of wonderful experience. She is a certified career coach, and she's a national career expert, and she's actually just based here in Atlanta, so she's a neighbor. Her company, HallieCrawford.com, has a team of coaches, and together they've helped over thousands of people find jobs and get into wonderful careers, and they do this work really with people all over the world. Hallie is also a wonderful writer. She's been featured in Forbes.com, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, the AJC, and so on and so forth. She's just wonderful at what she does. If you want more information on Hallie's services, definitely please go to her website, HallieCrawford.com. She has some really nice tools and resources for you all, so take a look at that. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Hallie.
Thank you, Hallie. That was so wonderful. I really appreciate it, and greatly appreciate all of you being here today, especially what is most likely, for most of you at least, your lunch hour. So I am Hallie Crawford, as Hallie said. I'm a certified career coach, speaker, and author based in Atlanta, Georgia. I have an undergraduate degree from Vanderbilt University and a master's degree from the University of Illinois. And we are here today to talk about how to navigate the first 90 days of a new job, which, as we all know, can be incredibly stressful. Some say that it takes at least 6 months just to get your sea legs to a certain extent in a new job. So we are going to talk about specific tips and advice to help you navigate this more effectively. And one of the things that I wanted to share with you just really quickly before I show you our agenda for today is that we understand how hard this can be, this beginning of a new job. It's really exciting, obviously, because hopefully you've landed what you consider your dream job, or at least close to it, or a stepping stone towards it. But it also can be very unsettling in some ways and kind of nerve-wracking, kind of depending on the situation that you're in. So we understand how this is. We've been coaching clients all over the world, as Hallie said, for just over 19 years now, and helping people figure out, what their dream job is, but landing that new position. And once they get into that new position, how to help them be successful with it. And I always like to mention that we've been doing this for this long because I realize that I kind of sound like I'm 12, or at least maybe in my 20s. I'm actually 46 and have been coaching and training for 19 years, like I said. So we understand how difficult this can feel, and the advice that I'm going to give you today is the very same advice that we give to all of our clients to help them get their feet wet, so to speak, and feel more grounded and effective and successful and a little bit less nervous in their first 90 days of a new job. So here's our agenda on the next slide here. We're going to talk first about the 7 kind of most common obstacles that we see in our clients to being successful in the first 90 days of their new job. We're going to give you 10 tips to get ahead of the game and feel better about being successful and effective there, and have you begin to incorporate those or start to think about your strategic career plan. And we actually have some freebies we're going to offer to you all today too as we go. And then finally at the end here, I do want you all to walk away with very specific, tangible, reasonable action steps to take in order to move forward with this process, okay? By the way, as Hallie said, 2 kind of admin things. This will be recorded, so you'll receive a recording of it. But if anyone would like a copy of the presentation itself so that you don't feel like you have to be frantically writing everything down, please feel free to email us at admin@halliecrawford.com for a copy of the presentation. We would be more than happy to give that to you. And then secondly, if for any reason we don't get to all of the questions today at the end, I would be happy to answer those via email. Please don't hesitate to email us either at admin@halliecrawford.com. If you have additional questions, whether it's today or in the next week, you've thought of something that you want to ask, please feel free to email us. I'm happy to answer that way as well, okay? All right, so let's talk first about the 7 common obstacles. These are the most common ones we find with our clients, and of course, there are more on the list, but these are the ones that we find are the most common with our clients. They are not as effective, or wouldn't be, because number 1, so take a look at this slide here, they might not be taking enough time to observe and learn about what the culture of the organization is and best practices for the organization or for the industry before they take action. A lot of times I think that in the first 90 days of a new job, we feel like, okay, I've got to show my worth and show my value, and we start taking action in some cases and making changes too quickly, when we really do need to take some time to kind of observe and learn and see what's going on first and what works most effectively within the organization, okay? And by the way, as we're talking about these, please think about which obstacle most applies to you, because that is going to be the first thing that you want to address using the tips that we're going to give you today. So get out your pen and paper, please, and write down which obstacle most applies to you, because that's the first one you want to tackle. So the first one is not taking enough time to kind of sit back and observe and learn a little bit. For some of the clients we work with, it's trying too hard to be liked and being a little bit too much of a pleaser versus speaking up when you think you need help, for example, or you have a suggestion or idea for a different way to do things. Number 3 is thinking your way of doing things is the only right way. This goes back to taking the time to observe and learn and understand and realize that, there's probably a reason why a process is performed a certain way, because it's been tried many different ways before you got there, and this is the best way that they've found so far. So don't always assume or think that your way of doing things is the only right way. Number 4 is assuming that you'll figure everything out really quickly. Like I said, it's at least 6 months. I would argue a year before you really get established in a new role and get your sea legs. Number 5 is thinking you have to work through your obstacles alone because, for example, you're afraid that, oh gosh, well, they'll wonder why they hired me if I don't know everything right out of the box. Number 6 is not communicating enough regarding what your strengths are, and what some of your weaknesses may be. And I'm not saying here run around the office saying these are my weaknesses, yahoo, but it's more about communicating, this is who I am as a professional, this is what I bring to the table, and I might be the type of person, for example, that points out some of the challenges that may come up along the way. I'm not doing it to be difficult, I'm doing it because I'm a detail-oriented person, and that's what I bring to the table. And then number 7 is not taking the time to learn who the key players are related to your role. And as part of this, one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit later is understanding and taking the time to develop a relationship with the key players who impact or affect your role. But as part of that, taking the time to establish that relationship and making it an effective one. How often do you need to meet with these people? Understanding what their leadership or work style is, or what their communication style is, so that you can adapt and adjust to the different key players and be very successful as a result. And we'll talk about that more in a moment. So let's talk about and get into the top 10 tips that we have for you today. So the first one that we want you to do, as we talked about on the previous slide, is we want you to identify, ideally, your top 2 obstacles so that you can understand, okay, these are the things I need to tackle first. So take stock of where you are right now in terms of your 90 days and which obstacle applies to you. Where are your weak points, so to speak? Identify those top 2 obstacles and start to work on developing a plan to address these for the first 90 days. And part of why I say this is I actually want you all to have, after you've worked through the action steps from our slides today, I want you to have a tangible plan written out. It's not good enough to just have it floating around in your head because it can get confusing. You can feel like you're in the dryer on spin cycle all over the place. We want you to have a plan for tackling the next 30, 60, and 90 days to address not just the obstacles, but the things you need to do to take initiative on as well. So a working document that you have on your desktop at your work computer or personal computer, whatever is best for you, that you can then write down, okay, this is my plan. These are the kind of soft skills I need to work on. These are the hard skills, and these are my goals. Those would be the 3 sections you want to create for your plan. So tip number 1 is to identify your top 2 obstacles. Tip number 2 is to realize that just like anyone else in the organization, over time, you've got to earn respect, right? And the way that we want you to think about this piece or this tip is you want to make sure, if you take a look at the slide here, that number 1, you're taking the time to listen to and get to know and understand where they're coming from, your coworkers, your supervisor, by the way, too, and your employees, so that you can learn from whatever their expertise or experience is, but also so that you can develop that relationship and that rapport with them so you can understand how they work and operate, so you can best understand how your strengths can help them and how your strengths, you guys can work together most effectively. Number 2, as part of this one, you want to make sure that you're being respectful of those who have been there for a long time. And remember that even though you're new, and they may have hired you, for example, because you've got some new, fresh ideas, that's fantastic. Still keep in mind that it is valuable to listen and learn and understand why things are done the way they've been done, not just assume that, gosh, that doesn't seem like that's the best way and it's broken and it needs to be fixed or changed. Take the time to get some context around why things are done the way they are, because having that context can not only demonstrate that you're open to feedback and you're interested in listening and learning, but it can also help you when you give ideas or suggestions, maybe for changes or improvements or something new. It's grounded in that context and isn't just shooting from the hip, okay? Number 3 here, in terms of earning respect, so to speak, is to ask questions first, like seek to understand where people are coming from first, because again, this is part of the listening and learning right out of the box at the beginning. And take the time to get to know every key employee or key player if you will, and this bullet point needs to be revised here. I apologize for that, guys. Take time to get to know every key player and get to know your coworkers and employees' strengths, what they're good at, and by the way, maybe what some of their weaknesses are, not that you're going to point that out to them, but so that you can find out where you can help them and support them, because some of their weaknesses, some of your strengths may play to their weaknesses where you can help them with certain things. Okay, so you want to get to know and understand what both are, but also take time to understand and get to know what their personality type is. How do they prefer to be communicated with? How do they communicate with others? Is email better with them, or phone, or an in-person meeting? And get to know, take some time to understand what their values are. What drives them in terms of being at the organization where you're at now? Because understanding what drives other people will help you tap into that to help you leverage them when you need help based on what their strengths are, but also to help motivate them and empower them and empower your team and your employees as well, okay? So make sure that you take the time to do all of these things and not just learn about, for example, because I think for a lot of us, we'll say, okay, these are the tangible tasks and, you know, practical things I need to learn about and understand, and they neglect to take the time to understand who the people are and what makes them tick, the people around them, to help you be successful. All right, so tip number 3 is to identify and find a mentor. And when I say this, I don't mean that this is going to happen overnight. I realize that finding a mentor is a big deal. And it can take time to identify someone, whether it's within your organization or within, if you've moved into a new industry, for example, that is someone that you'd like to leverage and have lunch with once a quarter or whatever it is. So ideally, you can identify a mentor within, let's say, like the first 3 to 6 months of being in your new job, if possible. And they can be within or outside of your organization. It really depends on who you're closer to. I would recommend, ideally, especially with a new job, and especially if it's a new industry, finding someone within your organization. Don't forget to ask the HR department, for example, or your supervisor if there is a formal mentoring program or if they have a recommendation for a possible mentor. But within your organization can be a really good, valuable person. And there's nothing wrong, ideally, with having an additional mentor outside of your organization. And this would be the case if, for example, there's a friend of the family who's always acted as a mentor to you and you want to continue to leverage them as well. Or if you were very active in your industry association before this new job and you've already made some really good connections and people who are assisting you already. There's nothing wrong with having 2 of them, one from the inside of your organization and one outside of it. But one of the things that you want to do, and then we'll get to this first poll here in just a second, Hallie, how many currently have a mentor. One of the things you want to do, especially, when you're figuring things out for the first 90 days, is to set up regular meetings with them, whether it's monthly over the phone or you take them to lunch, or maybe it's every other month, but make sure that you've got some kind of arrangement with them in some way, shape, or form for a consistent feedback so that you've got that support and you know that it's there. And be sure to, obviously, ask them for advice along the way and industry-specific advice based on their experience and knowledge, having been in your shoes, for example. And make sure, too, that you let them know and are open to feedback from them along the way, too, because it's not going to be incredibly valuable if they can't be very direct and honest with you about things you need to change. So, Callie, if we could do this first poll, we're curious for you all today attending how many people currently have a mentor, and hopefully if you do, you are leveraging them regularly. We understand, obviously, if you do not, and just by the way, as we're gathering the poll responses here, this is a great way to leverage your UGA alumni network, because putting, in the subject line of an email or a LinkedIn message to them fellow UGA alum, if there's someone that you see that you'd like to reach out to or to about being a possible mentor, Alumni Association is a great place to look for that. Hallie, if you could read me the results, that'd be great. I can never find them.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like 38% of people attending today said that they do have a mentor, and 63% said that they do not.
Gotcha. Okay, so I'm actually really glad that that many people do have one, because a lot of, I'll be honest with you, so please know you're not alone, a lot of our clients don't have one. It's not something that, because you know, there's plenty of companies or organizations out there that have them, but a lot of them do not have a formal mentoring program. A lot of people don't have one. Please know, keep in mind, as I said earlier, this isn't something that happens overnight, like I said. It can take a little bit of time, but I definitely want it to be on your action item list, everyone, so that as you're getting used to your new job, you're kind of keeping an eye out for, as you're getting used to the new job, but also, as we talked about before, identifying who the key players are. You're keeping this in the back of your mind. Is there someone that you've come across that could be a possible mentor in the long run? So let's move now to tip number 4, and this is to identify where you need to enhance your skill set. So this is the tangible stuff that a lot of times in a new job we gravitate towards. It's like, okay, what kind of software do I need to learn, or I need to take a class in this, or this. So we don't want to forget this one, but as I said earlier, a lot of times this is the one that people gravitate to, and that's why we talk about the other things as well, the soft skills and all of that. So you do want to include coursework or training in your annual career plan. And I say annual, I know we're talking about the first 90 days here, but we want you to think longer term than that as well, to enhance your qualifications. So this may be something that you need to check with your supervisor or your HR department for ideas, because they may have specific training classes they prefer, you know, that their employees for the organization attend, or perhaps they've got training that, you know, in-house training that they provide. You do want to check out, though, and be proactive about this. So part of the point here, everyone, is to not just wait for them to come to you and say, hey, I think you need some training here, here, and here. Be proactive and say, okay, here are the 3 areas where I think I could use perhaps additional training. You can check out internet courses. We like lynda.com. We like coursera.com. And also check out the industry association for whatever industry you're in, because a lot of times they will have recommended coursework and training on there too. And usually the ones, obviously, that they recommend have been vetted out and they think highly of. Consider whether you need a certification in something specific that may be a little bit more in depth, and perhaps that's something you want to work on over the next year. Keep in mind that in some cases, there could be local college courses or just adult education courses for professional development. One of the places that we like and our clients have attended and we've gotten really good reviews from them on is the General Assembly. In Atlanta, there's one at Ponce City Market, and they're now cropping up. They're all over the country and in large cities. So General Assembly is another place that you can get in-person certifications and training as well. One of the things that you can do, thinking longer term, is to research LinkedIn profiles of those people in higher level positions, kind of one step up from where you are, and what qualifications or relevant education do they have? Or even look at your peers at other organizations, for example, or within your organization. Start there, since we're talking about the first 90 days. What are the qualifications that they have? Kind of check them out and identify and make a list of things. I think I need to add this to my plate or to my roster. And then finally, over time, again, as you're getting to know the key players within your organization, consider meeting up with them, taking them to coffee, meeting with them in their office for a few minutes, whatever it is, conducting those informational interviews with those people in higher level positions as well, over time, okay, as you start to identify who they are, so that you can learn what's important at the organization and what is critical, what are some critical soft skills, if you will, to make sure that you have to stay successful or be successful within your organization. Tip number 5 is to over-communicate. Observe and emulate the key players in your organization and be seen. And so I'll explain each of these kind of one by one here. So first of all, taking initiative, this is what we talked about a little bit earlier, that you want to make sure that you are demonstrating that you're a team player, you're willing to volunteer your time and advice, speak up in meetings, ask questions, and don't be afraid to ask questions, because that's part of the listening and understanding at the beginning. In terms of over-communicating, remember we talked about earlier about explaining to people and educating others about what your strengths are. Part of our job as a professional, especially in the first 90 days, is to help kind of teach people how to treat you, so to speak, so that they can understand how to best support you and vice versa. So one of the things that we recommend is that when you first have, your first official formal kind of check-in meeting with your supervisor, for example, provide them with some context about how you work most effectively. Let them know, for example, one of our clients, she was the type of person that was very calm under pressure, and she had gotten feedback in her previous position that people always thought, oh, well, she doesn't really care about her job as much because she's not running around like a chicken with her head cut off when, there's a huge deadline coming up. That was not the case at all. She did care very much, but she's just very cool under pressure. So she educated her new team and her supervisor and gave them that context of who she was as a person so that they could understand where she was coming from, understand how to work most effectively with her, but also so they wouldn't make assumptions about what was going on. So for example, if you're more introverted than extroverted, let them know that and say, sometimes I may need to have a little bit of downtime in my office. I just wanted you to know it's not because, I'm antisocial or whatever. I just sometimes need a little bit of this down focus time. Is that okay? Or vice versa. If you're more extroverted, I tend to be someone who, thrives on a lot of teamwork, et cetera, et cetera. So please feel free to throw me into, whatever projects you see I would be fit for, because that would be fantastic for me. So I want you all to go into your new job as well with enough self-awareness to then educate everyone around you about who you are, how you come across, and why you are that way. So don't just go in there again trying to perform the tasks all the time, but develop those relationships by educating them about who you are and preventing those possible assumptions as well. The second thing on the slide here is to observe and emulate the key players in your organization. So we talked earlier about getting to know them and establishing rapport and a relationship with them, which is great. Again, depending on who they are, some people it wouldn't be as appropriate to do so. It would be key players within kind of your circle. However, for this one, observing and emulating them will help you create a list of soft skills that you need to improve in order to be successful. So in your first 90 days, as you're doing the observing and kind of listening and understanding as well, you want to create a list of, okay, not just the training I need to get or the tangible hard skills that I need to obtain, but you also want to understand, gosh, I might need to be a little bit better at, change management or conflict management. Or I noticed that a lot of the, C-suite people at this organization have this, and this type of demeanor. Whatever it is that you're observing and seeing in the key players above you, those are things that you want to start to write down to identify and, a list of soft skills that you may need to improve and work on in the long run in order to be successful at that organization. And a lot of times, by the way, these soft skills relate to the culture of the organization. And so that will help you kind of fit in and navigate that a little bit better as well. Let's move to tip number 6, and that is to be confident. We talked earlier about, understandably, you may be nervous in your first job or first 90 days of your new job. That's normal, of course. But keep in mind, too, that you want to make sure that you're paying attention to how you're coming across and that your attitude is critical. So here's the deal. If you take a look at this slide here, is your attitude affects your actions, which in turn is going to affect your outcome in your new job. 85% of our clients tell us that they are their biggest obstacle to their career goals. It's not something outside of them. So you want to make sure in the first 90 days as well that you're identifying areas where you feel a little bit less confident, whether it's working with a specific team or you've been put on a new project that you know part of how to perform the tasks, but not all of them. And in addition to thinking about, okay, where do I need to get additional training and learn additional skills, consider what affirmations you can develop for yourself, though, that will help you come across as more confident and positive. Watch your body language as well. Make sure that you're sitting up straight in meetings and that you're engaged. Pay attention to, that you're standing up straight when you're talking with people. And keep in mind, by the way, everyone, that your body posture and body movements can make a huge difference in how confident you feel. So all the way from the clothes that you wear helping you feel more confident to how you, sit and talk with people during the course of meetings is a huge kind of communication tool that's going to help you come across as more confident in your new role, but also make you feel more confident as well. So pay attention to those areas where you're hiding out a little bit more and you don't feel as confident, because those are the areas that you really want to pay attention to your nonverbals, okay? Let's talk about tip number 7, and this is to be a leader and be a leader right now. Don't wait till after the 90 days. So some of the things that you want to start to put on your list of soft skills is to begin learning how to motivate the other people on your team. This goes back to what we talked about, identifying and understanding what their communication style is and what their values are. Learn how to handle conflict effectively and do this right out of the box, okay? Develop your emotional intelligence, and there's a book here that we highly recommend. If any of you feel like, hey, I need to develop my emotional intelligence and kind of those soft skills a little bit more. Emotional Intelligence 2.0, quick, easy read, really good, juicy information there. And then finally, communicate your strengths and your needs. So one of the things that I wanted to mention, and I'll piggyback on this in a couple more slides here as well, is as part of being a leader, and like we said, developing rapport and a relationship with the key players within your team. Design the relationship with them effectively, and this would include your supervisor. So one of the things that you also want to do in the first 90 days is make sure that you all talk about, okay, what is our main goal, or what are our goals for working together? Who should play what role on the team that we're on? Are you better at, remaining organized and I'm better with ideas? Like, design the alliance, so to speak, or how you all can work together effectively. How often do you want to meet? And where do you want to meet? And how long should that be? So go to your supervisor, for example, if they haven't come to you with this, and come up with ideas for the structure, or at least ask for what the structure should be so that your relationship is as effective as possible. So don't rely on everyone else to come up with, here's how we should work together effectively. You all determine that in advance. And ideally, if you can talk with them about, okay, great, so if we have feedback to give each other, how should we do that? Would you prefer that I give you feedback in person or via email? How to handle conflict or challenges that come up. If you talk about these things in advance before they arise, those things will be handled so much more smoothly when they actually come up. So as part of being a leader in your new role, you want to kind of take charge a little bit in terms of designing the alliance and the relationship with each person, and make sure you cover those specific areas. All right, so the next thing that we want to talk about as part of your leadership skills, if you feel like, if you're one of those people that like assessments, and I'm one of those people, so I wanted to share this with you all today. This is a leadership wheel from Development Dimensions International. It's a very highly regarded management consulting firm that's been around forever. These are their top 10 leadership skills that they say are most critical in this day and age in the global economy. And I encourage you all to rate yourself, to print this out and rate yourself in each area so that you can start to identify, okay, how good am I in these leadership strengths in each of these areas? And what are the 3 areas that I need to develop over time? So again, a lot of this as we're talking today is about kind of doing a self-assessment of where do you stand related to your organization and related to your new role, and understanding, okay, how can I be more effective? Ideally, too, over time, perhaps and after the end of or at the end of the first 90 days, I would encourage you all to have your supervisor rank you on these as well, so that then you can together say, okay, what are the things I need to be working on beyond this first 90 days? By the way, everyone, just really quickly as we go to the next tips here, if any of you, like I said, have additional questions, don't hesitate to email me at admin@halliecrawford.com. But I also wanted to offer everyone listening in or attending today, if you need a free career strategy session to talk about any of the things that we're talking about. I know that we're throwing a lot of information at you, and it can be a lot to digest in some cases. So please feel free to email us. I'd be happy to talk with you about that, to give you advice on any career goal, whether it's something that we're talking about today or some other career goal that you have. Happy to chat through things with you, especially if you have a very specific, unique situation. All right, so let's talk about tip number 8. This one is to make sure, especially, I wanted to say especially in the first 90 days, but honestly, this goes well beyond that. You want to make sure that you demonstrate to everyone in your organization, and especially obviously within your team and your supervisor, that you are open to and would like to get constructive feedback from them, that you're open to learning and adjusting and changing as needed. Remembering, obviously, your way is not always the right way. And the incorrect response is on the left-hand side of the slide here. If you do get feedback from someone in your first 90 days that's kind of tough to hear, you want to make sure that you don't dismiss it, blame them, and criticize them, okay? Even if it's kind of in your head, because that just creates that negative energy. But you want to show them the correct response of accepting it, implementing the changes, and improving based on the feedback that they've given you. This is part of demonstrating, again, that you are a leader, that you're confident enough to take and accept feedback and make adjustments as needed, and that you don't always have to know every single thing, and you don't have to be right every single time. I think sometimes people put the pressure on themselves. Well, they hired me, so I'm supposed to be an expert, in everything, for example. And even if we don't truly feel that in our hearts, sometimes we have that assumption in our head that we can't look like we don't know what we're doing. It's okay to ask for help, ask for feedback, ask for support, ask for information, especially in the first 90 days. And it's all about the way that you do it. You can do it in a confident way, okay, that shows that you're open to feedback, you're open to learning and adjusting, which is so important. All right, so let's talk about tips number 9, and then we'll get to tip number 10 here in just a moment. We've got our second and last poll for today as well. We want you to establish effective relationships. And we talked about this a little bit, and I'm going to go into this a little bit more right here, is to communicate your strengths. The reason why I talk about this one is because the more people understand what our strengths are, the more they can ask us to pitch in the right places, and the more you can be a supportive team player. Part of why we want you to communicate your strengths as well is to educate people, again, about who you are as a professional and what you bring to the table. And because in some cases, everyone, some of your strengths may be misinterpreted. So if we use a quick example, I served on the board of the Georgia Coach Association several years ago, and we all did a quick personality assessment to get to know each other, understand what our strengths were, et cetera, et cetera. And all of the people that were on the board, except for one, we were all kind of big picture, entrepreneurial, future planner, idea generation people. And we would just run with an idea and, hope that it worked out for the best. And there was one person who served on the board who was more of a detail-oriented person. And it was so interesting because as we all talked about this openly together, he explained to us, and we were better able to understand that that detail-oriented nature was not him saying, oh, no, we can't do this, we can't do that. He brought enormous strength to the table because he was able to kind of rein us in a little bit and say, these are the things we need to consider and bring out. And the only reason why we knew that is because we had taken that personality assessment with a coach at that time, and he was able to articulate that more clearly to everyone else. So you want to let people know, hey, I tend to be a detail-oriented person. And so because of that, I wanted to ask these few questions. Does that make sense? So check in with them, but let people know, educate them on a consistent basis about what your strengths are and who you are as a professional with your strengths, but also with your personality type. Number two, don't be hesitant to ask for what you need. Don't assume that they're just going to figure it out through ESP. Like, ask them for resources that you need. Ask them for help when you need advice or guidance on something that you're not sure about. Go over, number three, the ground rules for effective relationships. We talked about those earlier. How often should we meet? How long? How do you prefer for me to check in with you? Do you want me to check in with you? Or should I do it once a month? Is that the best way to do it? That is part of number four, managing up. You take the initiative with your supervisor to ask how you can best support them. Don't just assume they're going to hand it over to you, but managing up is about asking them for what they need, throwing out possible ideas and suggestions, and finding out if they're not a person who wants you to text them all the time, then don't text them, and don't assume that that's the best way. Find out what's the best way by asking. And then finally, make sure that you update your LinkedIn profile. And this is a part of establishing effective relationships within your organization. Update your LinkedIn profile with your new job and position, and start to get a little bit more involved on LinkedIn, connecting with your new coworkers, and also to learn about your new organization and maybe your new industry if you have shifted gears. If we could do the second poll, that would be great now, Callie. How many are currently active on LinkedIn? So what we're asking here is, hey, I'm active on LinkedIn, which means I'm on LinkedIn at least once a week. We'll set the bar, a little bit lower. It all depends on the person, but that you're currently active on LinkedIn. And especially what we want you to do, as we said, is connect with your new coworkers, because that is a way to learn from each other, not just inside of the organization, but through articles they may have posted. And then, by the way, if they post something, you can comment on it or talk to them about it. So it's another way to kind of learn about who they are and understand where they're coming from. And Callie, if you could share these, that would be great.
Sure. It says that we have about 82% that say that they are active on LinkedIn and 18% saying that they are not.
Wonderful. Okay, good. So those 18% work on this. This should be one of the things that goes on your action items list. And just keep in mind, as we said, it's another way to get to know kind of more background about your coworkers, and also identify commonalities that you have so that you can kind of establish that deeper relationship. What I have found is that people connect with people in some cases more on the personal level. So if there's some kind of commonality that you all have, whether it's, you grew up in the same hometown or you worked at a different organization before, or whatever it is, bringing that up can help establish that relationship and make it even kind of more closely bonded in a faster way. One of the things I mentioned at the beginning that we would have a few free resources for you. One of the resources I did want to mention as well, in addition to the strategy session, is we do have a strategic career plan that can help you with writing down and taking action on and organizing all of the action steps that we've talked about today. Please don't hesitate to email us at admin@halliecrawford.com. We'd be happy to share that with you. So as part of that, tip number 10 is to create a plan. So the first things that we would like you to have down, as we said earlier, is how to address those obstacles that we talked about at the beginning. Those would be your first two action items. Develop a plan to find a mentor, because as I said at the beginning, this one takes a while. So even if it's, it takes you the next 6 or 8 months to find someone who's the right fit, whatever it is, you want to start on it now because finding the right person can take some time. Think about which leadership strengths you need to improve from the leadership wheel and include classes and training that may be required. We do want you to establish 30, 60, 90-day goals, and ideally it would be best to share those with your manager and find out if you're on the right track. So tip number 10 is to create a plan. And in terms of your 2 action steps in the next week, so let's start to move towards our Q&A portion. And as we do that, I'd like you all to write down at least, 2 action items or steps that you will take in the next week. It may be that, gosh, I'm not really sure about my leadership strengths, so I want to take the leadership wheel assessment. Okay, fine. Or I really feel like I could use a mentor, and I haven't ever had one, or I haven't had one in a long time, so let me work on that one. In another situation, it could be that I've been feeling really behind, like I don't understand this new software I'm required to use, whatever it is. It could be for you identifying a class to take. It could be, hey, I want to schedule the strategy session with Hallie. So please go ahead and get your pen and paper out right now to write down your 2 action steps. And also start to think about questions that you would like to ask, and feel free to put those in the chat box because we will move towards that. If anyone feels like they need additional career coaching, even if it's just one session to say, hey, I need to, get clear on what my first 5, goals should be for the next 90 days, happy to do that and to chat with you about that. And I want to, before we get to Q&A, I want to leave you with the greatest risk in life is not taking one. This is my favorite quote. Whenever I am feeling like I don't want to step out of my comfort zone and something is hard or difficult, and I'd rather kind of stay safe and quiet, or however you want to think of it, this is the quote that always pushes me to take the next step to move to the next level. The greatest risk in life is not taking one. Keep that in mind. I know that we have asked you to do things that may not be the most comfortable for you, but remember, you need to push yourself outside of your comfort zone in order to make things happen. All right, Callie, if we can do the Q&A, that would be great.
Sure.
And then I will put up a slide with our contact information in case anyone wants to ask us additional questions down the line.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so we will let people type in your questions now. Please feel free to go ahead and do so. I know we covered a lot of content today that was really useful. I'm sitting here with someone who recently started a position, and she's taking copious notes, so I think this has been great. So one of the questions that comes up for us is, do you have any suggestions for formatting the accomplishment documents?
Sure. So formatting the accomplishments document. So I would recommend having it be like in certain sections, and let me know if this answers your question, and if it doesn't, please feel free to type in the chat box. So I would have certain sections of, number 1, like projects and results, things that you want to accomplish or have accomplished. I would also have a section for like testimonials though, and like kudos from people kind of along the way. And as part of that, a third section that would be like constructive, feedback that you're getting from people, whether it's direct or indirectly, so that you have a sense of, okay, these are the things I'm working on and I need to improve. Hopefully that answers. Callie, do you think it answers?
I think so, yeah. And another one here is, how can you talk about your strengths in the beginning without being perceived as cocky or pretentious?
Oh, sure. Great question. So what I would say is, it's kind of the language that you use in an introductory sentence, and you're saying it sort of, it depends on the context and the situation as well. But what I would say is something like I said during the presentation of, I tend to be, a little bit more detail oriented, or I tend to be, you could even make a joke like, I tend to be obsessed with the details. And so this project or this conversation makes me think of these 5 things. So I think a really good way to do it is to kind of make light of it, but in the right way. Like what I just said, obsessed with the details, or I tend to always be really focused on, the details or on the big picture. So, that's one of the things that I'm good at, but please let me know if, there's something else that we need to be focusing on. So kind of being self-deprecating humor can help with that and can be a good way to introduce things like that slowly but surely.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Also a question here about someone that's starting in a role as an executive leader, but they are being trained currently by an assistant, an administrative assistant who's really kind of lower in rank but knows the job. And so how should one transition in those first 90 days to getting back on top of like being their boss? Do you have any suggestions for that?
Great question. Those situations are very unique and interesting. So what I would do is through the course of the time that you're getting trained at the moment, obviously be open to input and gracious and, thankful and all of that. And then when it's time to shift gears, reestablish the relationship and use the techniques and tools that we talked about earlier about, okay, and you don't have to say it literally this way, but in your head, okay, now that, the tables have turned a little bit. So, okay, great, so-and-so, thank you so much for all of that. Let's talk about how we work together effectively going forward. What do you need from me? How can I support you? This is how often I would like for us to meet. I think it's ideal to do this, this, and this. And I would prefer if we can handle things this way. Does that work for you? So it can be somewhat collaborative, but if you basically, bottom line, reestablish the relationship in the new format that it needs to be, that will help kind of bridge the gap between those two things.
Excellent. And another, I think this will probably be our last question here, but just do you have any advice for someone that's coming into an office or a work environment and they are the youngest person in that work environment? Any tips on or strategies for them?
Yeah, great question. So I would definitely, pay attention to how confident you feel and not being intimidated in any way, shape, or form by everyone else there, with X number of years of experience. So pay attention to the confidence piece that we talked about, how you're coming across. In some cases, you may want to, dress a little bit more professionally and more formally than you would otherwise, because that can help establish you as boost your confidence, but establish you as a little bit more professional, so to speak. And then the other thing I would do is just be open to learning from the other people. So identify some of the, key players, 2 or 3 people that you'd like to pick their brain a little bit. And maybe it's even you take them to lunch to learn a little bit more. I think establishing solid, strong relationships with some of the more senior people will help you feel more confident because they'll end up being kind of allies on your side. And when you get to know people a little bit more like that, you'll feel less intimidated as a whole by the whole environment because you'll have established kind of those bonds, if you will. So those are some of the things I would start with.
That's great advice, Hallie. Thank you so much. Today was wonderful. I think this is such an important topic and one that you don't really think that you need until you're in it, and it can, it's hard to know. And then looking back, I can see all the mistakes I've made that are on that, obstacle list. So it's, really helpful content to definitely have either before the 90 days starts or in those first 90 days. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your words of wisdom today.
Most welcome. Happy to be here. And thanks everyone for their time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Okay, bye-bye.